Hey, it's Mrs. Hale, and I just wanted to do a brief video explaining what this week's lessons would be because they're appropriately timed, even though I didn't really mean for this to be about the civil rights movement. And of course, I'm looking at it more from a historical perspective of the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. But considering all that is going on across our country right now, including here in Des Moines, I thought it was appropriate to maybe do a bit of an introduction to explain the resources available to you. This first one that I have for you is taken from the magazine Free at Last, which is from the Southern Poverty Law Center. And it is a magazine, and so it reads like a magazine as far as your page following the columns and stuff like that. But this first part that I have for you are 5 different parts, and you can pick and choose what you would want to read. But the first part is about the historical aspect of slavery and through the Civil War. The second part and the third part I think are particularly interesting because it's more about the 50s, 60s, and 70s and how it's a movement by the people, grassroots, if you will. But then it even goes into the confrontations that begin to emerge, whether violent or nonviolent as well. The other PDF document that I have for you is from the same magazine, Free at Last, but it focuses on the people and what they did during the civil rights movement and how they were killed and for which purposes. So you have, like, for example, Cheney, Goodman, and Schwerner, who were part of the civil rights movement down in Mississippi, going down to help integrate and also to register people to vote. You have the story of Emmett Till, a 14-year-old boy who was murdered. You have the story of 4 girls that were killed in Birmingham, Alabama when their church was bombed. I tried to include white people, black people, people that were reverends and priests who were part of this movement, but also people that were part of the military that were killed during this movement as well. And so trying to get a wide variety, and it's one of those things that you can pick up and put down, read 2 pages about someone, and then go on with your life and come back to it again. The civil rights timeline, a lot of it on the first page you guys would know because we were covered in class together. But then come like the 1940s, 1950s is basically where we stopped seeing each other this year and had to flip to online learning. And so what I did was I put some of the movements and some of their explanations as well, including like Jackie Robinson joining the Dodgers, but some other events like Brown v. Board of Education, which reversed the 1896 Plessy v. Ferguson separate but equal Supreme Court ruling. And Little Rock Nine integration, of course, people like Medgar Evers, Malcolm X, MLK being murdered, but also then, Rosa Parks and her Birmingham, or I'm sorry, not Birmingham, excuse me, Montgomery, Alabama bus boycott. The last page actually does bring you to more modern day. 1968, I have the Mexico City Olympics, and this is the iconic image of 2 of our Olympians on the medal stand raising their fist in solidarity for the Black Power salute. But then I included people like Oprah Winfrey and Colin Powell and Condoleezza Rice, who in their own ways were, progressing forward, whether within the actual government, becoming the first Secretary of State that were colored, or even Oprah, who became this media titan in a time period when there was major crises going on in the 80s and 90s in our country. And then I also have Barack Obama, and I noticed I just have a typo there, and the Black Lives Matter movement that started, unfortunately, because of Trayvon Martin being murdered. Then you have a resource for the civil rights movies. And the civil rights movies, I included ones that you may have heard of before, like The Butler, Green Book, and Selma. And those are available to you. I was looking online, like through online subscriptions or through purchase. But oddly enough, I had come across this one by PBS, and it was actually aired about a year and a half ago. And it's about the Jim Crow experience in the North, and it happened to focus on Minnesota, and I decided it was really apt timing considering what started with George Floyd in Minnesota. The other PDF I have goes along with the book, or the movie, excuse me, The Green Book. The Green Book is an actual traveler's guide that African Americans would have to use, or could use, I should say, as they traveled throughout America. And what it did was it basically provided them a list of safe places for them to go, where to eat, where to stay overnight, where to stop and get gas. And unfortunately, this was the reality of, cross country travel for them. The other PowerPoints that I'll include for you are the Power of Protest movement PowerPoint, because realize that during the 50s, 60s, 70s, it's not just about the African Americans and that form of civil rights, but a number of groups developed their voice during this time period as well, including the Yellow Power, the Brown Power, particularly led by Cesar Chavez, Rainbow Power, looking particularly at the homosexual movement and gay liberation movement, the Red Power, Pink Power for women's rights, led by Betty Friedan, among others, and then lastly, Green Power. Now, the Green Power is an interesting one, just because with the Green Power, you think of environmental concerns being more apt to today, but actually, until the 1970s, we didn't even have like the Clean Air Act and stuff like that, which is remarkable to me that, like, in your parents' lifetime, this developed. So then I also have civil rights music. So the civil rights music is an activity that I would normally do in class. And I do start off with 1989 Public Enemy, their song Fight the Power. And it is a bit risque. But within Fight the Power, I did include some of the lyrics and meanings behind them. And keep in mind, a lot of these have historical references that you're listening to music and you're like, oh yeah, I enjoy it maybe, but what does it actually mean? So I included Bob Dylan, Pete Seeger, Dion, Bob Dylan again, Joan Baez, and then Nina Simone. And I included some of these civil rights songs. And what I did was underneath in the notes, I put what their theme, what's some background info, what's significant about it. So that way when you listen to the lyrics, you kind of get, oh, when, Bob Dylan is talking about only a pawn in their game, you realize it's talking about Medgar Evers. Then last, I have a civil rights activity one. You don't have to do it as an activity, but if like Brown v. Board or Emmett Till or any of these topics really interest you more, I included ways to dive deeper into them so that way you can learn. But that's it for the week, and I'll just upload all these onto Classroom, but pick and choose what you want to do. Pick and choose at your own time, your own leisure. Use this as a chance to learn and to formulate your own opinions as we are going through a momentous time in our country again right now within the Black Lives Matter movement and also in the light of George Floyd's death.